Welcome to Roll20 Tips and Tricks. I'm Keith Curtis. A lot of people come to Roll20 for the first time and wonder, well, what's it all about? I've seen people come to the forums asking, is this a game? Or how do I create a game? Or how do I create a character? And I've created this video to just kind of walk you through it from the point of view of somebody coming to the game from the very first time, starting from absolute scratch. So to begin with, Roll20 is not a game in and of itself. Roll20 is an online platform that allows you to play games over the internet, or some people even use it in the privacy of their own home, just using Roll20 as a big whiteboard to move miniatures around on. Roll20 is engineered primarily to help you play role-playing games. It emulates the tabletop role-playing game experience and allows you to play games such as Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or any of literally hundreds and hundreds of different types of role-playing games. We're going to approach this video from the point of view of Dungeons and Dragons, since as poll data has shown, it's by far the 800-pound gorilla of the role-playing game industry, particularly on Roll20. So, looking here at this screen, you can see on the upper right that I have created a brand new player. Actually, I created this about 6 months ago, it looks like, but nothing has been done with it. It's got a username of KC3, that's Keith Curtis 3, because this is the third username I've created. There's nothing that keeps you from creating more than one username, although generally you really don't need to unless you have a special case. So we have up here at the header we have something called recent games. You can see that I have absolutely no games. Then I have two buttons that will take me to places and allow me to do things. One is create new game and one is join a game. I'm not going to really go through join a game in this video because I think it deserves its own video. But join a game would allow you to join a game that somebody else has already set up. There is a tool that allows you to find games that are accepting new players, and the game master, or the person who's running the game, will help you to create a character. They will tell you what is necessary, what game system they're playing, and that sort of thing. But again, we're not going to go through the join a game. We're going to go to create new game. And the reason we're going to do that is until you are in a game, there really isn't much you can do on Roll20 other than you can look up rules, you can browse the marketplace, you can go to the community and talk in the forums. But if you want to play a game or create a character, we need to have a space to do that in. So we are going to create a new game. So I'm going to click that big pink button. It says create new game. And we have start new game is the first thing we see. First thing we need to do is we see this area called names and tags, and we're going to put in a name from this. We're going to call it starting from scratch. And I hope I don't make too many typos. I have the typing skills of the Incredible Hulk. Now I could just go ahead and say I'm ready, create game, but we're going to want to create a specific kind of game. We're going to want to create a game that will facilitate us making a Dungeons and Dragons character. So for that we want to tell our game a couple of things. We want to choose a character sheet because we want a character sheet that matches the type of role-playing game that we are going to play, and we are going to play Dungeons and Dragons. So if you see, if I click on the drop down, we have a variety of character sheets that are created by Roll20. There are also many that are either created by publishers, created by independent users and made available for everyone, but you can see there are many different types of character sheets here for many different role-playing games. We're going to go back up to the top here where the official sheets by Roll20 are. There are only a few of those, maybe about 10 or so. And we're going to choose D&D 5e, that's Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition by Roll20. So we're going to tell it that. It'll give us a little preview of the sheet to let us know that, to give us a little look to see what the sheet will look like when we are in the game. and it will give you some information about the sheet itself. Most of the sheets that you choose will tell you a little bit about themselves. And we're just going to say, I'm ready, create game. That's all we really need to do. Oh, one more thing I should point out. Over here on the right, we do have a variety of modules that you can start a game with. Again, that's kind of the subject of a video on its own. These allow you to create a game with content already in the game, an adventure, maps, monsters, all the notes that you'll need to run a game. And there are several here that are available for free. If you're going to play Dungeons and Dragons, the Master's Vault has been designed for beginning players, and it will help you learn as you go along. But we're not going to choose a game yet. Again, this is just a bare bones beginning, so we're going to say, I'm ready, create game. If you hear any scratching or snuffling in the back, that's my dog. He's taking a nap behind me. All right, now, it's taken us to the home page of our game. We're not logged in yet. All we've done is create it. And we're going to look at a couple of things here. We have our big pink launch game button. We'll get to that in a minute. We have content, which will show an archive of all of the things we have typed into the chat in the game. We haven't even entered the game yet, so that would be empty. We have a button here that you can create a listing. Again, I wouldn't suggest that at the point because we really don't have a game yet. This would be to, once you have a game that's all worked out, you can create a listing for that game and look for players. And then finally we have settings. We have game settings. We have the ability to copy our game, which again has nothing in it, to clear the chat archive, or to delete a game. We're going to quickly take a small detour to the game settings just to quickly look over those. Settings for starting from scratch. Let's see, allow players to import their own characters. If you were going to create a game that you were going to allow people to bring characters into, you might want to click yes there. And then we have a whole bunch of settings. All that I'm going to look at is the most important one right here is access Compendium in-game, determined by character sheet default. All that means is if the game has some sort of content that you can look up, such as monsters or spells, things like that, then if your character sheet indicates what game system it is, and our character sheet has determined that we are going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons, it will automatically link us to the D&D 5th edition Compendium. And that just means that we'll have a wealth of material that we can use once we're in our game. There are more things that we can set down here. Again, this is way too much for beginning. We're just going to take all of the defaults. So let's go back to our starting from scratch homepage, and we are going to launch the game and enter Roll20. And the first thing we are going to see is our loading screen. Then it's going to ask us if we want to play through the tutorial. We're not going to do the tutorial for this simply because the tutorial is a little old and it hangs at a couple of points, and I'm pretty much going to go through the things you'd go through on the tutorial here anyway. So let's go ahead and close that. You're welcome to try the tutorial. At some point you might run into problems with it, in which case just close the tutorial and proceed on from there on your own. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close that. It's asking me right now, although you can't see it on this screen because it's a pop-up of the browser, my recording software doesn't get it, if I want Roll20 to be able to use my microphone and my camera. At this point I'm going to tell it no, but if you are going to want to use some of the built-in audio and video chat, you need to allow it to use your camera and your microphone. It will only use them while you are in-game. All right, so we are looking at a blank grid here. There is not much to see. We have a toolbar on the left with a variety of tools. On the bottom, we have a list of the players that are involved. And let me click off my video for a second here. And you can see, there we are, that it will tell you the name of the player down at the very bottom, and then if they have uploaded an avatar to Roll20, their avatar will display there. Turn that video back on. All right, so we're looking at the screen. We have a couple of other controls that we can go through. We have up here a blue page toolbar. And if I click that, you can see up at the top, there really isn't much to look at here yet. We have a area with a flag on it that says Players, that is called Start. This is where you will keep the maps that go with your game. If you are just a player, you will not see this when you are logged in as a player, and you won't need to. This is a Game Master control area where they can move players around from map to map and create new maps. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Over here we have a zoom control, a zoom slider up the upper right, where we can zoom in and out of our tabletop. The tabletop area is called the virtual tabletop, or VTT. Some people will call it the window, the room, the map, but technically it's the VTT, or the virtual tabletop. And then over here on the right, we have a number of tabs. Right now we are in the chat tab, and you can see, for instance, if I type something in here like hello, it will appear for players to see. Right now, any player that was logged into this game can see could see that. Roll20 gives you the ability to whisper to other players, to format chats as emotes. For instance, my character swings his mighty sword, which you might not want to look as if you're saying, but as if you're describing. And that would be /EM swings his sword. And it would tell you that KC3GM, my player name, swings his sword. You have the capability of changing that in-game name to the name of your character, but that's something we'll get into later. Last thing I want to point out on the chat is every time you log in for the first time as Game Master, there is a hover area over here that if you hover over it will show a link that you can send to other players to allow them to join your game. So if you already know who you want to play with, you can send them that link in an email, and they can click on it. Their browser will take them immediately to Roll20, and they will be officially in your game. The second tab over here is your art library. At the moment, I don't have anything in my art library, I don't think. No, I do not. I can upload items in here. For instance, if I had a token I wanted to upload, I could add a folder so that I could organize my uploads. But at the moment, I don't have anything in here. We'll worry about that later. Next thing is the Journal tab, and this will be characters and handouts that are in your game. Again, we're just beginning, so there's nothing much to look at there, but we're going to add a character very soon. The next tab is called the Compendium, and this is the thing that we told outside the game that we want to be associated with our game by virtue of the character sheet we chose. We chose a D&D character sheet, so all of the items here on the right-hand side all pertain to D&D. So for instance, if I wanted a list of monsters, I could click on the category Monsters, and here is a list of all of the monsters that Wizards of the Coast has made available that are free to use in any game of Dungeons and Dragons. I could drag these right out onto the virtual tabletop. I'll do it right now. Let's drag out an adult red dragon, and it's going to be a little disappointing. I'll show you why. Well, first of all, we get the handout with the bio and info. We get a character sheet, which has all of the stat block you will need to run the character, and attributes and abilities. That's a little bit more advanced. We're not going to mess with that right now. But the part I said was going to be disappointing is there's no artwork associated with that character sheet. It's just a blank little meeple type of man there. If you purchase something like the Monster Manual or one of the other compendiums for Dungeons and Dragons, or whatever game system you might be playing. They will usually come with artwork ready to go. So if I were to drag out an adult red dragon and I had the monster manual, you would see a properly sized token here with a picture of an adult red dragon. We're going to go ahead and close this. And now if we go back to our journal tab, we will see that now, living in our game, we have an adult red dragon. I can drag out another adult red dragon and another one, and now I have 3 that are on the board. They don't really look like anything yet because they don't have name tags, but we will get that. If you'd like to see more about that, I have a video about how to set up and link tokens that will show you how to fill in all of these little bubbles so that you can track things like hit points and armor class, see the name of the creature, and things like that. And I will put a link to that down in the notes for this video. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete those. We've looked at the Compendium tab. There are a couple of other tabs here. Again, each of these could use a video of its own, but I'm just going to quickly tell you what's in them. We have the Jukebox tab, which allows you to add music that can play in your game, and you can either set up music to play on command, or you can set up music to play when a particular page loads. So if people are going to go down into the depths of a dungeon, you might have an audio track filled with creepy, creaky dungeon noises that starts as soon as you go to that page. Second to last here, we have what is called the Collections tab, which basically is a bunch of collections. There are 3 main areas to that. There are macros. Again, could use its own video, but macros are bits of code that you can use to make your character or characters or features of the game happen automatically with a click of a button. We have decks, which allow you to use decks of cards in your game. Some game systems call for that, such as Savage Worlds. Every Roll20 game comes with a default set of playing cards, 54 playing cards. I think there are 2 jokers. And then finally, rollable tables. That allows you to generate randomized content. For instance, if you wanted to have a table of random treasure or random weather conditions, things like that, you could set up so that the rollable tables could give you a randomized output. Now, the last one we're here is the Settings tab, and I'm going to go through this in a little bit more detail than I went through the last 2 because they are applicable to every game. First of all, you have your display name. I'm going to turn my video off for a second again. Let's go ahead and click that off. Display name, this is your name as it will display in the game. So I'm going to eventually create a character that I'm going to call Bob the Mighty. All right. There. And you will see that my name down below should change to Bob the Mighty, but it has not. Oh, save name. Silly me. There. Now my avatar name down in the lower left has changed to Bob the Mighty. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video back on. We have below that the master music volume level. If your GM is playing music but you are having trouble hearing the other players, you can turn down the master music volume level here to a level that is comfortable, or you can even turn it completely off. Everybody has their own comfort level when it comes to music in a game, so every player has their own ability to change their own master music level. A lot of the things I'm going to show you now are things that are available to you when you are a game master. When you are a player, you will not have access to all of these controls. Some of them are meant to be used by the controller of the person who's running the game. We have a whole bunch of options here. I'm not going to go through in a great amount of detail things like use advanced keyboard shortcuts. A lot of these things you can look up on the wiki to find out what they do, but they're not essential for running the game. I would not recommend turning on 3D dice while you are first starting because they can be a little bit confusing depending on the game system you're running. And then we have some other things down here that are, again, our game settings. You can change the color of the bubbles that you saw on, for instance, that adult red dragon. You can change those colors there. You can do a lot of different things. We're not going to go through all of them. You can change the size of that avatar down at the lower left. I've just made it bigger. You can make it small. If you're not going to use video, you can go to names only. And then players will only see, or actually you, because this is a setting that is unique to you, any player can set this for themselves, will only see the name at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn that back on. And I'm going to keep them small just to keep it out of the way. So there's Bob the Mighty down there. Let's see. Lots and lots of controls here. Chat tech, you can turn on and off your decision to send and receive video. The Game Master can turn video and audio off altogether by choosing the chat technology of none, no video or audio. And every player has their choice of what they want to broadcast and what they want to receive. Please be aware that when you are invited to a game, these are settings you'll have to make inside the game. So if the Game Master has turned on broadcasting video and voice, until you get a chance to turn them off, you will be broadcasting video and voice. So if you want to disconnect your webcam or put your thumb over it or something like that until you get a chance to turn it off, that would probably be a good idea. If you want to share video and audio, then you are set up and ready to go as long as the Game Master has turned that on. And I think that's as much as we're going to go through here. Again, a lot of these tabs, each one could use their own video, and you've come here wanting to know what you can do as a beginning player. So first of all, let's get rid of that featureless red dragon. We are going to add a new character. And again, this is Dungeons & Dragons, so we're going to create a Dungeons & Dragons character. We're going to click Add a Character in our Journals tab. And it has created one with a randomized name of Ifafio. I don't like that name. We're going to call this guy Bob the Mighty. This is something that, with a basic game, the Game Master has to create for you. They don't have to fill in your character sheet, but they are the only ones that are allowed to add new character sheets to a game. If you eventually decide to go with a subscription, there are some scripts that allow players to add characters. But this is a game we've created, so we can create our own character. If you are invited to play in somebody else's game, the Game Master will provide you with a blank character sheet, pretty much like what this looks like here. And if you create your own game and you want players to play in it, you'll need to create character sheets for them. They can fill them in. You just need to do the actual job of making it exist. And this is basically to allow the Game Master to keep control over their own game. There are some things that are available here for where it says default token, avatar. We're not going to worry about those yet. That can come afterwards. Right now, we are going to create a character. So he's going to be Bob the Mighty. If you're the Game Master, you're going to want to click and tell it which player can control this. So we're going to let the player known as Bob the Mighty, in this case myself, have that in his journal. In other words, it'll appear on the right-hand side, and it can be edited and controlled by. Both of these need to be assigned to the player who is going to control the character. That's all we need to do there. So let's go ahead and save changes, and we are presented with the actual character sheet. The first thing is bio and info. That's stuff we could have filled in on the previous sheet, but we want to actually make a character. So I'm going to click on character sheet. And we have a grayed out character sheet in the back with a dialog box in front. And there are three options here. There are use the Charactermancer. The Charactermancer is character creation software that allows you to create, in this case, a Dungeons & Dragons character very easily. Create an NPC which will switch the sheet over to the much smaller NPC sheet like you saw earlier with the red dragon, so that you don't have all of the options that aren't needed. And then edit sheet directly. If you are comfortable creating a Dungeons & Dragons character and don't need something like the Charactermancer, you can click that and you can fill it in all automatically. We are going to use the Charactermancer because it's easy and it's kind of fun. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to click Use the Charactermancer. And we are presented with the Charactermancer for Bob the Mighty for Dungeons & Dragons. We have a list of buttons across the top. Each one of these is a tab that we are going to go through that will allow us to create a character. And we're going to create Bob the Mighty, who's probably going to be a fighter because I don't want to spend too much time just on the character creation. So the first thing we need to do is we need to choose a race. We are presented with a pop-up here. Choose a race. Bob is going to be human. Now, you'll see that there are probably about, 8 or 9, 10 different choices here, and they all say SRD after them. That SRD refers to the System Reference Document, and like you saw with the monsters earlier, those are all of the resources that Wizards of the Coast have made available for people to use for free. If you want to add more options there, more official options, you can purchase things such as Xanathar's Guide to Everything or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which will give you more classes and more races. Or Volo's Guide to Monsters will also do that. The Player's Handbook is probably the one that you would want to buy first if you were going to buy one, simply because it has all of the basics. But Bob is going to be a human. And alignment, we are going to make him the chaotic, let's make him chaotic neutral. Doesn't really matter because there aren't too many mechanical things tied to that in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We need to choose a language. He already knows Common by default. Let's say that Bob the Mighty was raised by dwarves and he learned to speak Dwarvish. We have a couple of options here. We have Standard Human. We have Custom. Custom will allow you to choose some variations of your own, but we're going to go with Standard Human, and that does give us a couple of things here. Standard Human is going to tell us that we are going to get a +1 in every one of our ability scores. And that's pretty much, we're down here at the bottom. That's pretty much all we need to do. Over here on the right, you'll see it says Standard Human, where we've chosen Standard Human, and it'll tell you all of the things that Standard Humans get. Your walking speed is 30 feet. That'll be filled in for you. You can read, write, or speak Common. That came up for us. And one extra language of our choice. We chose Dwarvish, and so forth and so on. If you were to choose a different race over here, it would tell you on the right-hand panel all of the things about that race. So we're going to go to our next tab, which is Class, and we're going to choose a class for Bob the Mighty, and we are going to make him a vanilla fighter. So as soon as we have chosen class, we can see that it automatically tells us that we are proficient with simple weapons and martial weapons. That will be on our character sheet, and that we are proficient with these types of armor, basically all weapons, all armors, and those will also be listed on our character sheet. It tells us as a fighter that we are given 2 skill proficiencies to choose from. We can choose from acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, perception, and survival. So it automatically constrains you to the legal choices. So I always like to choose perception as a skill because I think it's probably the most useful skill in the game. And we'll just choose athletics because Bob is going to be a very physical kind of person. As a first level fighter, you get to choose a fighting style. We're going to make Bob a great weapon fighter. He's going to excel at fighting with heavy weapons. I'm not going to get into the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. That's outside the purview of this video, but you can choose all of the legal fighting styles there. Again, with all of these, if there are more skills or more options for any class or race that are available, with other newer compendiums, they will be included in the Charactermancer if you have purchased that compendium. All right, so we have chosen our class, we have chosen our class options, and we're going to go on to our ability scores. Now here's the part that confuses a lot of people. Our abilities are custom. That's the only choice we have to generate ability scores. Apparently, the mechanic of rolling 3d6 or 4d6 and drop 1 to create your character ability scores is not in the system reference document. It's in the player's handbook. So legally, Roll20 cannot give you the ability to roll in these fields. Once again, if you've purchased something like the player's handbook, the ability score generation method will be available in there, and you will get the various methods that are given to you in the player's handbook. So we have 6 stats, 6 ability scores that we need to fill in. Now, what we could do is we could go back over to our chat tab over here, and you can issue a roll command, /R for roll the dice, space, and then 3d6, and that will give us a 3d6 roll. 11. Now, we could simply do this for each stat, but we're going to want to do a couple of things. First of all, most people don't roll 3d6 for their ability scores. Most people use the 4d6 and drop 1. So I'm going to type in /R 4d6, and I'm going to tell it to keep the highest 3. So that's K for keep, H for the highest, 3 for the number of dice I want to keep. And then you will see there that it is rolled a 1, 3, 4, and 5, and it's only going to keep the 3, 4, and 5 and tell me that I generated a 12. Now, I'm going to want to put those in places that work well for Bob. So let me go ahead. I'm going to clear the chat archive just to make it a little more easy to see what we're going to do. And we're going to tell it to /R roll 4d6, keep highest 3, and we're going to do that with we're going to do that once. That gives us a 13. Now here's a little trick that you can do with the chat. If you have your cursor down here in the chat text input and you press the up arrow key on your keyboard, it will show you the last thing you entered. Actually, it'll keep cycling back through previous entries. So if I just press that up arrow key, press it again, I'm going to get another stat and another roll. So there's half of my rolls already. I'm just going to do that 3 more times quickly. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I now have 6 scores. And again, I'm not going to get too heavily into these methods of D&D, but I'm just going to type in 15. Let's give him his con or his dexterity as maybe the 13. His con as let's make that the 15 and put the 16 on his strength. And that leaves us with a 10, a 12, and a 10. So let's just go ahead and let's put the 10 on intelligence, the 12 on wisdom, and the 10 on charisma. So there are basic scores. We're not going to do a class on optimization here. Those will be good enough for our purposes. So we've done that. Now we go to background. Oh, one more thing. Let me scroll up a little bit. You can see that although I put in a 16 on strength, it registers a 17 up here, a 13 on dexterity, it registers a 14 up here. And the reason for that is that we chose human. Humans get +1 across the board on all their ability scores, and Roll20 will figure that in. So you can see that all of our scores have been bumped up 1 by our rolling method. And let's go to our background. Let's choose a quick background. We only have one choice. Again, in the system reference document, there is only one choice for background. They give you a sample background to show how they're built. So we're going to choose the only one that's available to us, which is Acolyte. If you purchase something like the Player's Handbook, you'll have the full range of the ones that are in that book, which gives us insight and religion. as skill proficiencies. Those are automatically filled out on our character sheet, and we get to choose 2 more languages. Let's say that Bob wants to talk to most other player character types in their own language. He already knows Common and Dwarvish, so we're going to give him Elvish, and he's going to need to be able to understand what his enemies are saying. He doesn't like orcs, so let's give him Orc as the background. Also, we can fill in our personality traits, our ideals, bonds, and flaws. Generally, I like to write those in myself afterward, but let's just fill them in with random rolls. And you'll see that they also appear over here on the right. You can keep those, or you can edit them when you go to your final character sheet, or you can choose for your own. We have personality traits. I've spent so long in the temple that I have little practical experience dealing with people in the outside world, and so forth and so on. Again, not germane to character creation or the mechanics of character creation. You can either choose those, fill them out when you have your final character sheet, or just ignore them, whatever your game master likes to have you do. So the next thing we go to equipment. We have 2 options for equipment. We have either start with the base class equipment, which is dictated by our class. So if we go back here to our class, we can see that the fighter starting equipment starts with chainmail or leather, a longbow with 20 arrows, a martial weapon of choice, shield, or 2 martial weapons, and so forth and so on. If we go to equipment and we tell it class equipment, it will automatically give us those choices. We could also just go with starting wealth, and that says PHB. That's interesting. That probably shouldn't be in there. Class equipment. But if you went with starting wealth, it would generate the starting amount of money, and you could use that to purchase equipment afterwards, after you've gotten out of the Charactermancer. All right, so chainmail or leather armor plus shield. Let's go with leather armor, longbow, and arrows, because we want him to have some ability to fight at a distance. And then we are going to get him a great axe, because he chose great weapon fighting as his fighting style. And let's just give him one more thing. Let's give him, how about, since the great axe is a 2-handed weapon, he really can't use a shield. Let's give him a pike. Just if he needs reach. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Then we can choose light crossbow or hand axe. Let's go with a hand axe. Well, it looks like you get 2 of them. And then you get to choose a Dungeoneer's pack or Explorer's pack. These things are detailed as to what is in them in the Compendium, but if you choose one of these, it won't just put Dungeoneer's pack or Explorer's pack on your character sheet. It'll put the contents of each. Let's give him a Dungeoneer's pack. He is going to go descending into the depths of the earth, and because he has the Acolyte background, he has a choice of a prayer book or a prayer wheel. Let's give him a prayer book. And that goes through the equipment. The next tab is spells, and it says here, the arcane is a mystery to you. That's because Bob is a fighter. He doesn't have any spells. If you had chosen a spellcasting class, it would give you a list of spells that you could choose, and they would automatically be on your character sheet. Next is feats. We have not chosen a variant human, which is the only way to get a first level feat. So there's just absolutely nothing to choose here. Bio, our character name Bob the Mighty, we can fill in his age, height, weight, eyes, hair, skin color, all that sort of stuff. That's up to you, whatever you want to fill in there. And then finally we go to review, and this will go through and it will check to make sure that everything we have chosen is legal for our character. For instance, if you had chosen a background skill that you had already gotten from your class, it will let you know that you have that skill chosen twice, and you can choose an alternate skill to replace it. But everything looks good here. We're going to click Apply Changes as our last step, and this will actually do the writing to our character sheet. Everything we've done right now up until now has been to make choices, and this will write them to our character sheet. It'll take a few seconds building your character, and there is Bob the Mighty. You can see that he is a first level fighter with an acolyte background. There are our ability scores down the left. We also have our saving throws in the next box over, in the next column over. Below that we have all of our skills. We have our various proficiencies down here at the very bottom. Then in the middle column we have our armor class, initiative, and speed. Our current hit points, it has given us maximum hit points determined by our class and our constitution. And then there are spaces for temporary hit points you might get from a spell or feature, or number of hit dice. There's a little tracker here for death saves. Below that, there is an area that has all of our attacks. And this area you can either add to manually, or if you add something like a spell or a weapon from the Compendium that has an attack in it, it will automatically put it up there. So for instance, Bob is going to shoot a longbow. This is clickable. I can just click longbow and bam, it will tell me I rolled a 16 to hit. You'll see two hit rolls over here. By default, Roll20 for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition will always roll twice. Just take the roll on the left, the first roll. If you have advantage, you can take the higher of the two. If you have disadvantage, you take the lower of the two. It's just a quick way to do advantage and disadvantage. There are other options we can set so that you can tell it to always roll always roll ask whenever you're rolling, and so forth. But you'll notice it didn't roll the damage. By default, a lot of players like to roll the hit, but they don't want to roll damage unless they know they've hit. So you can see that we used a longbow down here. If we click the name of the longbow, name of the attack, it will finish rolling and it will tell us that we have done 5 points of piercing damage. If you hover over any roll in the chat, it will show you what the roll expression was. So for instance, this was rolling 1d8 plus 2 from my dex, and then it will give you the results that I rolled a 3 and added 2 to get a total of 5. So you can always check to make sure that the math is going right. There are a couple of other things here. Down below the attacks and spellcasting, we have all of the equipment that we are carrying, and as you can see, we put in Dungeoneer's pack right about here, and down below it is everything that is in that Dungeoneer's pack. All of our weapons are there. If your Game Master is the type who likes to track total weight for endurance or carrying capacity, it will tell you the total weight of all equipment. Bob is carrying about 106 pounds of gear. And then finally over here on the right hand side we have all of our personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. We have resources that are available to our character which you can track. For instance, a fighter has second wind and I am carrying 20 arrows. You remember that I just fired my longbow over here, but somehow I still have 20 arrows. Without access to the API, the scripting environment of Roll20, the character sheet cannot automatically change values on itself. If you are in a game that uses the API, or if you yourself are a pro subscriber and you create a game that uses the API, you can set it so that ammunition and things like that are tracked automatically. And it will let you know when you have run out of spell slots or arrows or whatever your resource you're tracking. And then finally over here on the right we have our features and traits. As a first level fighter we have second wind, we have fighting style, great weapon fighting, and then we have shelter of the faithful from our background of acolyte. You'll notice whenever I hover over these couple of buttons up here on the right, there is a word balloon and there is a gear icon. And also when I put my cursor over, for instance, I'm putting it over second wind right now. Unfortunately, the recording software doesn't show my cursor. It only shows the results of hovering over it. But if I click on second wind, it will expand it on the character sheet so you can read what second wind does, that you have a limited well of stamina, yada, yada, yada. And click on that again to collapse it so you can quickly read whatever feature and trait, whatever things it gives you. And these two other buttons here, the first is the word balloon. If you click on that, it will send that information to the chat. So if the GM asks, "So what can you do with the second wind? Does that require an action, a bonus action, or whatever?" And you can just click on that little word balloon. It will send it so that the GM or other players can read it, and it will tell you that it uses a bonus action. And then the last is the gear icon. All that does is it expands it out so that you can customize it yourself. So for instance, if you are not wanting to purchase the player's handbook or whatever, you can create your own features and traits and type them in yourself. All you have to do is press the little plus button down there. You type in the name of the feature, the source where it comes from, if it's a class, a feat, a background, or other, and then a little bit more detail about that. And then down here you can type the text, and it will act like any other feature. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And we're going to go to the other two tabs of our sheet. We're going to go to the bio. This is where you would fill in anything about your character, their appearance, allies, additional features and traits that might not need to be on the front, your backstory, treasure, things, just basically a way to record information. And finally, if you are a spell casting character, this will give you a list of all the spells you can cast, the number of total slots that you have in that class or in that at that level, and the number of slots you have remaining. Again, you'll have to keep track of those manually unless you are in a game that uses the API and your GM or yourself, the creator of the game in any case, has installed that particular script. This character sheet does allow you to install a script if you have that capability that will track spell slots and ammunition. And there's a couple of other things up here at the top, like your spell casting ability and your spell save DC and so forth, that you would need to know as a spellcaster. So attributes and abilities, again, you can create macros or bits of code that are unique to your character. You can add them here. Let's go ahead and add one for Bob. We have created our character sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize it. Any one of these little windows that comes up here, you can double click on that title bar and it will minimize. You can see I've got Bob the Mighty there. It's kind of out of the way, so you can keep your character sheet up during the game for quick reference. Or if you're the game master, you can keep a number of character sheets available during the game. You can also click this button here, which will pop it out into its own window, but you'll lose some functionality if you do that. You won't be able to drag and drop things to the character sheet. Which I should probably show really quickly. Let's go back to our core sheet. Let's say that Bob has found a sword that he wants to keep. So if I go over to my Compendium tab and I type in sword, it will show me under the items area here that I have some possibilities. There are magic swords, there are regular swords, there are swords that granted +1. We're just going to give him a regular old longsword. I'm going to scroll down a little bit over here. If I drag from here and drag longsword, don't drag from here. All that does is it allows you to show details about the piece of equipment. If you drag a longsword onto the character sheet, let's scroll up just a tad there because it looks like it wasn't going to show me the warning properly. There we are. Accepting drop from Compendium. All that means is that if you drag and drop a Compendium item onto your character sheet that the character sheet is capable of understanding, in this case a longsword, it will go ahead and it will fill in all of the details. So if I do that, you will see now here at the bottom of my character sheet, bottom of my equipment, I have now added a longsword. And up top here, I now have longsword entries. And because it was Compendium drag and drop, it knows that there is a difference between a one-handed use of a longsword and a two-handed use of the longsword. So it gives me the two, one at the 1d8 plus 3 slashing damage and one at the 1d10 plus 3 slashing. Those are clickable, so if I wanted to use that longsword, it's ready to go. I'm using it one-handed, and it has told me I've rolled a 9 to hit, So I probably missed, let's say I had advantage. I click on longsword one-handed, and it will roll the damage for me. I did 10 points of slashing. Bob is mighty. All right, so that's the character sheet, but we don't really have a token for him. Now, if you are playing in someone else's game, control over things that go in the game is generally restricted to the game master, and that keeps the game organized and lets the game master keep control over all of the assets that the game uses. The game master will probably provide you with a token, or if you have a piece of art you'd like to use for the token, you could email it to them or send it to them in some way that they could drop in as a token. So I'm going to go to the art tab here, and I'm going to go to premium assets, and I'm going to go to the free assets, and I'm going to pick a token for Bob. I'm going to click here on characters. Let's see here. Let's choose. Bob is using an axe. Let's see if we can find somebody who has an axe. This person has an axe but looks like a bobette. Doesn't look like a bob. But it looks like that's the closest one I'm going to find with a quick search. There are lots of tokens here that you can search through. But let's go ahead and choose this knight to represent Bob. And right now, this character, this token, is just a piece of art. It doesn't represent anything. I have another video on how to set up tokens that goes into great detail about how to set up tokens properly so that they're easy to use and easy for tracking. But right now, simply because I am the game master in any game I've created, I'm going to go ahead and double click on that token, and I'm going to tell it to represent the character Bob the Mighty. I'm going to tell it to show the nameplate, click Save Changes, and now this token represents Bob the Mighty. For more detail on how to set that up, I'd really recommend sitting through the other video. It can give you all kinds of hints and tips and save you from some time-consuming mistakes. So once you have created Bob the Mighty, you might be wondering, well, what can I do now? Well, if you're a game master, you can invite other players and you can have them fight creatures or other characters you've created. Or if you want to join a character or join a game, you can, once you're outside of the game, you can go to the character vault and you can upload Bob the Mighty into your character vault, which is an area outside of all of your games, which will hold copies of character sheets. They're not directly linked, so if you make a change to the one in your game, it won't change to the one in the vault. And then if your game master has turned on vault access, you can take that copy and copy it into the game of the person who is running, or into the game that the person is running. In this way, you could have a library of characters that you've created, so that if the player or the game master says, I'm playing a pickup game in 5 minutes, if you've got a first level fighter, bring him on in, you'll have Bob the Mighty ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and close that up. Like I said, this was a very, very quick overview of the things that are available in Roll20. I'm going to go through one more thing before I close up here, and I'm going to quickly go through the toolbar here because I didn't do it earlier. Going to quickly go through the tools. The first tool, the tool up at the top, has two options: Select Move, which is where you'll have it set most of the time, and Pan View, which allows you to basically drag the board around. You can also do that with a right click. I am right clicking now so that I can just drag the board around. If I left click on Bob the Mighty, I drag him around. If I left click but not on Bob the Mighty, I can drag out a selection rectangle and select everything that was inside that rectangle. The second is the layers. Right now we're on the objects and tokens, which is where you will spend your time if you are a player. You won't even see this tool. The Game Master has a map and background layer where they can put in adventure maps that players will not be able to accidentally select and move. There is a GM layer where the Game Master can put in tokens that are invisible to players until they are moved to the tokens. layer, or they can put in notes, anything they don't want the players to see. Then we have our drawing layer. I'm not going to go into detail. I'd suggest just playing around with it and finding out what it does. All of this stuff is also labeled or detailed on the wiki. We can choose our level of magnification here, or we can use the slider over here, or there are some other ways, such as if you have a mouse that has a scroll, you can use an Alt or Option and scroll up and down on your scroll wheel to zoom in and out. We have our measurement tool, and what this allows you to do is if you are moving your character, I'm going to grab Bob the Mighty, I'm going to move him over to here, I'm going to press the Q key, which is the hotkey for the measurement tool, and you can tell that Bob has moved 20 feet. If I press that Q key again, it creates a waypoint, and I can have moved 30 feet for Bob right there. If I hold down the, I don't remember what the keyboard command is because I haven't used it that long, but you can hold down a keyboard command to show the last move. Let's see, we have here the Fog of War tool. This allows the Game Master to hide and reveal areas of the map. We have our initiative tracker, and again, this is controlled by the Game Master, but let's say that you were playing Bob the Mighty. Now if I double click on him, I get his token. If I shift double click on him, I get his character sheet. And if the Game Master tells you to roll for initiative, let's go back to the chat, you can simply click on initiative there on your character sheet, and it will automatically roll it properly over in the chat and put you in the turn order at dexterity initiative roll of 17. Go ahead and close that up. Close the character sheet again. We have a quick die rolling panel. If your Game Master says roll 5d6, you can just go down to the d6, click 5, and it will automatically roll 5d6 for you over there. And the last thing is help and documentation, shortcuts, references, or to report a bug. And those is just basically a help feature. So that's the basics of how the board is set up, what the different tools do, and I've walked you through the creation of character and told you how you can get that character into another game. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for listening.